Cool. So we are live.
Yay.
Yay. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm really excited because I have a very special guest for my interview. And her name is Lili Steifel. She's an incredible artist entrepreneur. She's based in New York, and she has a lot of really exciting projects that we're going to talk about today that revolve around the topics of identity and performance, both in the creative sphere and also in business. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Mack. I'm a writer and a mindset coach. I help creatives to have more money, more time, and more freedom in life and business. And Lili, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like it's always such a thing when you listen to podcasts and stuff and people are like, thank you so much for having me, but it's so authentic. I'm so grateful.
I'm so excited to talk more about what you have going on. But just to start, I always ask my guests to tell us a little bit of their backstory, like where have you come from? Why are you here? Who are you? And how did you end up doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So where do I come from? I come from parents who have American nationality, who my father was a military man, an Air Force man when I was born. And so I moved around a lot and finally settled in Germany when I was 4. So I guess culturally, I feel kind of German. I lived there for 18 years. And I come from Germany is the really kind of constantly changing place also. But what's my story? I guess I've been an artist since I can remember. My first conscious memories are when I was 4, and I've always been singing and dancing, and I've always felt like very connected to my purpose, which is being an artist. And I'm lucky that my parents supported that. So I went to performing arts high school. I learned to read music. I played the French horn. I danced. I sang in the choir. I went to conservatory for acting, and then I had a quarter-life crisis and felt like I've been training my whole life to be part of an industry and part of a business that I didn't understand and that I didn't feel like wanted me and made me feel like shit all the time and made me feel like I was never going to be good enough and never worthy enough, and that I was to be ashamed of myself for having dreams and that I need to lose 20 pounds regardless of what I look like. And I kind of just felt really shitty and lost. And so I decided to move to the US because I'd never really lived in the US as an adult. And I moved to New York, which has been my dream since I was 8 years old. And if I understood how the universe works and how to manifest when I was younger, I feel like maybe I could have made things happen quicker, but I realized that I always kind of like I manifested myself here. I always used to write New York on everything, like pencil cases. I used to carve it into my bed. Like literally I would get a piece of paper and I would just start writing. I would just like draw the skyline of it because I just knew I needed to be here. And then I moved here and I was like, oh my God, this is the answer to all of my problems. So it's been a whirlwind and an adventure, but so I landed in New York about 5 years ago. I went back to school because the US didn't really care about my German undergraduate education. And now I'm in graduate school for arts management and entrepreneurship so that I can kick some ass when I'm in the business meetings and I understand contract law and I understand fucking like financial management and nobody can't tell me shit.
That's amazing. Yeah, with all those skills. And I love your manifestation tip. Just carve whatever you want into your bed.
And it will happen for you.
I'm true. Yeah. That's brilliant. Awesome. So yeah, I love that. And I think it's such an important conversation to have, especially for artists, that when you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur. Like you have to have all of these other skills to be able to succeed in the arts business because it is a business. And when you want to make money, you have to, have an awareness of all of these different moving parts of your career. So props to you for tooling up on all of those incredible skills. And tell us about the projects that you've got going on at the moment.
So I feel like at the moment, I kind of live in two worlds. One is the mixed space and the other is experimental studio. And that is where I kind of practiced all of my artistic skills and my entrepreneurial skills. And that's what I'm building at the moment. So the mixed space I kind of started it in May. So it's a very new kind of baby for me. And it started as a theatrical production. And then I realized that it's actually a whole world. It's actually a whole universe. I kind of think about folks like J.K. Rowling, how she started with a book, but then it became an audiobook and a Broadway play and a whole like amusement park. Like that's kind of what I think about as the mixed space. It's a theatrical show, but it's also a podcast. It's also a coffee table book. It's also a couple documentaries. It's also its own talk show. And it's a really an ongoing conversation. And it's actually this Saturday, for the very first time, it's actually a physical holding of space where the community is going to meet and everyone gets to introduce themselves, and we get to just like look at all these mixed people in a room and talk about it and talk about what the company is doing and how we're moving forward and just celebrate each other. So I'm really excited about that. So it really is, I think, in the most basic form, just a space. It's like, I call it a universe where we're looking at the future and we're kind of starting a movement that allows all of us to reconsider ourselves as mixed people and reconsider ourselves as part of a global nation and start as a people in the world, rather than as strictly an American or strictly a white woman or whatever these made up labels are that we function under. And then on the other side, there's experimental studio. And it's interesting. I feel like both of my main things that I'm working on started as a revolt. It kind of started as like, I'm angry or I'm really upset with something and it's imperfect and it doesn't work for me and I need to do something myself because I haven't found a solution that has made me happy. And that was the mixed space. Definitely. I was like, I don't understand how to live in this world as the person that I am. And I feel cut off from myself. And I feel like I need people who know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to feel crazy all the time. And the experimental studio was similar. I felt like I love school. I think I'm a really good student because I ask a lot of questions, but at the same time, I think that a student can be quite limiting, especially in institutional structures. And I've spent my life, being a student and having to function in a school. And I've always felt like, but there's so much other shit going on. Like I just moved to a new country, or my parents are speaking a different language at home than I'm supposed to be speaking in the classroom, or I just broke up with my boyfriend or whatever, but then I'm supposed to walk into school or walk into work and like act like none of those things happened and I'm just supposed to do my job. And I was like, especially as an artist, like how do you expect me to go to art school and be a good student artist when really my whole purpose is to like fight back and be angry and be uncomfortable and ask the hard questions. And so experimental studio is an opportunity for us to make work that is outside of some authority's gaze. So it's devised theater for those of us who are in this industry who know what that word means. And for those who don't, it kind of means like it's theater without a script. It's performance without like a hierarchy. There's no director. There's no anyone telling you what you need to do or how you need to do it. And it's us coming together all on equal footing. And oftentimes folks who are making tons of different kinds of work. So it could be dancers and whatever, and journalists and designers, and coming together and saying like, this is what I care about. These are the conversations I want to have that I can't bring into other spaces. And then we start from there. And that's how we make work. And in schools, I work with oftentimes like first year graduate students or first year undergraduate students who are coming into a new city or a new program or a new academic setting and having to get to know it kind of works in tiers. Like you start and you're like, okay, I'm at a new school. I'm going to be learning new stuff. There's all these new teachers, but then also there's this new cohort, or there's this new class. And so I have to get used to all of these things at the same time. And Experimental Studio tends to be the transitional tool that we use to allow us to have these conversations and work outside of the teacher's gaze, or the head artist's, the lead artist's gaze. And outside of the classroom, I often work with people who wouldn't necessarily call themselves an artist first. And I believe that we all are artists in our own right. And I feel that a large part of my purpose is to spend time with folks and give them the space and the compassion that they need to tap into their creative side, and to really allow them to find out what it means to be truly creative. It doesn't mean just think outside the box. It doesn't mean just like, it's not a gimmick. Being truly creative is extremely vulnerable and scary, and it's not something that we're often encouraged, especially as adults not working in like plainly artistic fields. And so I work with all sorts of people to help them tap into something deeper, and that usually then ends up allowing them to find words for their own mission statements as they're launching their own companies, or find a way to launch their product in a way that really feels authentic and true, or it allows them to introduce, new people to their team and allow them to integrate this new person seamlessly without there being any kind of, boundaries or any kind of obstacles allowing for with the workflow. Or it's simply like you're saying, like, how do we make more money? And it's just allowing people to use different kinds of approaches, like approaches that I as an artist have spent my life building, to figure out how to get to where you want to go.
Amazing. You're just like changing the game on so many levels. And I love it. And like authenticity has become such a top priority now, because everybody's realizing it's a real top priority in business now, especially because we're realizing that a lack of authenticity doesn't work. Like it's just a broken idea.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful way to open the space for artists to come in and use their skills, because that, being artists are working in authenticity. That's a language that they speak on a daily basis that a lot of people have been shut down to. So I think it's so powerful, the work that you're doing. And I have so many questions. So the first question that I want to ask you is, like, what is the vision for the mixed space? Like, what is the vision of the future that you want to create?
Yeah. So in order not to overwhelm myself and cripple myself with anxiety in terms of like trying to take over the world all in once, I've been moving step by step. And really that means for me to just stay present with my dreams, and to stay present with the desires that are coming up inside my body as a result of the conversations that I'm having and the life that I inhabit. And so for me right now, the actual next step is to finish an application that is due today, to get into a class that is going to allow me to really look at the mixed space as a production company and build the business foundation that I need in order to launch a fully functioning production company that has many different avenues, and that uses many different mediums to express or to facilitate a global conversation.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And it's such an important time to be having that conversation, because somewhere along the line we all forgot that we're all from like the same place. We're all a mixture of everything and everybody. Like nobody's from a specific place. Nobody's a specific one thing. And it's really important to be having that conversation now, especially.
And I just heard this really awesome quote yesterday. Her name will come back to me. And she said her goal is to link people so that they're linked on the same level, rather than like tier them in hierarchies, right? And that really resonated with me. Like when we can all when we take the time to really look at our full selves, and we bring that same capacity to others, and we see them in their full selves, in all of their gender expression and their racial expression and their cultural and their ethnic expression and all of the different ways that we build identity, then I feel like there's so much space to have love and compassion with each other and really have holistic conversations, rather than constantly just cutting us off from ourselves, cutting other people off from us, and just creating all these blocks that takes more energy to heal away. And it's what I think like leads us to war and all this unhealthy things that we're suffering from.
Yeah, totally. It's such an important way to heal the problems that are going on. And I really believe that it all starts with the work that we do with ourselves. And it's a concept that I started to become more familiar with is shadow work. And you know, it's that idea of like integrating the parts of ourselves that we've been rejecting, whether that's because they like haven't been reflected back to us in our families, our societies, and our communities. So we've just like cut ourselves off from those parts, and that's what leads to imbalance and illness and instability and not being able to be a full expression of ourselves. And I read a really interesting article the other day that was talking about the shadow work that we're constantly doing in the systems around us. For example, you know, they brought in some really interesting examples that I'd never thought of before. Like, you know, how when everything becomes like automated, and instead of like calling up and speaking to a person on the phone and getting the service, you have to like figure out that system through like an online form. You know, when you're dealing with a company, it's, you know, basically like all of this like emotional labor or like figuring out that's being put back on people, or, you know, just like things like identity fraud, like suddenly your credit card has been stolen, you have to have all these conversations with the bank, or like you can't get a mortgage because this thing happened to you from this, you know, from just like the brokenness of the system that we're in, that causes a lot of stress and like emotional labor that's added to your day, that's just kind of like undermining our ability to succeed and to really like show up in the world in the way that everybody can benefit from. And, you know, like, or like phone calls from people telling you that there's been a lawsuit filed against you, like all of this other stuff that we're carrying, like all of these emotional burdens. And actually I saw it was an artist, I've forgotten her name, but she had a piece in the Musée des Beaux-Arts here in Montreal, and it was talking about, you know, how like even within the conversation of multiculturalism, a lot of Black culture has still been left out. It's been left out, you know, like a lot of fine art, even though a lot of, you know, like Black culture has influenced some of the most famous fine artists of our time. And a phrase that I had never heard before that really stood out to me was emotional labor, like the emotional labor of not fitting in, of constantly having to negotiate being discriminated against or not being understood, or, you know, being sidelined, being silenced. And yeah, I think it's amazing that you're doing this project, because it's such an important and a healing conversation to be having. And another question that I have for you is, so when you're with the experimental studio and you're working, you know, outside of hierarchies that maybe we're used to working in, like what are some of the challenges that come up when you're shifting and working from that different place?
Yeah. Well, it kind of, I think they start, there's like, you either look at it on a micro level and how it ripples out, or you look at it at a macro level and then how it kind of manifests on really tiny, in almost like subtle ways. But oftentimes I think I tend to be most in tune with how it starts inside of people. And it's just the blatant uncomfortability with, oh, I have to move my body, I have to be seen. I might say something that I might be honest, which is, I think people are really afraid to be honest, that the process of identifying how you truly feel and then putting words to it and then saying those words out loud without editing yourself, without taking responsibility for the consequences, or without like trying to diminish the consequences while you're actually being honest. The fears of like, what are other people going to think about me? Am I gonna suffer from being brave? So really trying to find the container that is what I like to call a braver space, which is many way smarter women have taught me to use that phrase, the brave verse space. It's like, we're all already brave because we showed up. So how can we make it braver without it being so overwhelming that we can't thrive in this space? And giving everyone the real compassion and almost like unconditional love to find for themselves what that means. If that means that I'm just gonna keep breathing and not say anything, great. If that means that I'm gonna finally like write down all the things that I've been harboring for months about my boss or about this job position or about something that's happened in the company, then that's what that means. But I think just like setting it up, the creating the community agreements, allowing for people to kind of like slowly, like an onion, unveil all the layers that we have, and finding balance in yourself. So we often expect, especially in hierarchies, I know my place because I base it off of the person above me and below me. But if I equalize that, it could be really destabilizing. It can make people almost feel dizzy because they're like, it's like the equilibriums in their ears have been shifted. They're like, I don't know what's up and down anymore because the person that's above me is now next to me and the person that was below me is now next to me. So what does that mean? And so like really giving people the chance to connect their feet to the floor and connect their breath and their brain, and understanding that you are your own equilibrium and you can function independently from any other system that is made up and fake and probably not serving you anyway. And then we can work from there and really see where the magic is.
Amazing. Yeah, one of my coaches introduced me to the idea of how we manipulate ourselves, and it's that kind of that undoing starts with us in recognizing like how we've been manipulating ourselves to fit in or to avoid uncomfortable situations, and just giving ourselves permission to stop doing that and to take up the space in the way that we need to take up the space, and not be afraid of the consequences of doing that and doing it anyway.
Yeah. And allowing yourself to like process the grief and the anger that comes up with that. Like I have experienced often that there's a lot of grief that I realize, oh my God, I've been cutting myself off from this really, from this abundance really, or I have been sabotaging myself. I haven't been allowing myself my full expression because of whatever reasons. And then when I do start to do that work, I really grieve. And then I'm also angry at myself and angry at the other people that I was doing this for. And I feel like for me, it was really challenging in the beginning to be in touch with those feelings. It was like, this is so much work, right? Emotional labor, like it's a lot of work. And as you say, often women of color are most often women of color are the ones who are left with that work. And it can be debilitating.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And yeah, I think it's really important to make that support available for people, because I feel like that's our work, that's of our generation at this time. Like this is the work that needs to be done to open up, the gateways even more from where they, just like letting that shaft of light become a little bit wider through continuing to do this work. And it's really important for us to not give ourselves a hard time and recognize, be really compassionate, be really forgiving. Like that is the work, learning to do that. Rather than judging ourselves for not, succeeding in the ways we've been told we should be succeeding, or like living up to the expectations that we've taken on as the ones that should be true for us.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how this kind of work, how you're taking this kind of work into businesses, and that connection that you're kind of like bridging between like artists and businesses.
Yeah. So I think, again, it starts in the inside. It starts with me. It starts with me acknowledging that I'm an artist and I reject stories that say starving artist stories and stories about like, you have to climb the ladder and you have to pay your dues and all this stuff. Like, no, I'm also not depressed or broken or any of those things. Like, I'm fully thriving and flourishing in my own right. And I have a real respect for business and numbers. And it took a long time to get there. This was something that I was taught or that I was shown, but I built a real respect, understanding that if I acknowledge those tools, then they will help me grow. And I really have this vision of a world where artists respect business and the business industry, and the business industry respects the work that artists do, and that there's a real symbiotic relationship. And I see that symbiotic relationship the same way that we are in desperate need of balancing masculine and feminine energies. You know, like, every human being has masculine and feminine energies within themselves. And when we do the work to balance those, then we see that balance reflected in the world. And so I talk about it all the time. I tell everyone about it. And a lot of the work is just like introducing this concept to people. Oftentimes when I talk about it, they're like, that doesn't sound real, or I've never heard of this before, or they're really interested, but they don't know what it looks like. And understanding that half of it is really grounded in systems and paperwork and like fancy words that you can look up and that have research behind them. And the other half is like energies and feelings and sensations and experiences that you might not be able to put words to, or that you might not have any kind of idea what that means until you're really in it. And so kind of having to almost having to describe something that you can't really describe is the other half of it. And that's just part of it. And so I just have to like be extra confident, being like, yes, it's real. Even if it doesn't make any sense yet, it's real, I promise. And yeah, I took this really awesome class with, it started when I took this really awesome class with someone, his name is Roger Mannix, and he worked with Stanford business school students, and he had an MFA in acting, and he went to Stanford and he just played theater games. I mean, basically, there's more to it, but he played theater games, and it really changed the entire dynamic of their workflow, of the communication, and of the output of the actual products and how they sold it and all the stuff. And like the design school now also lives in Germany, in Hamburg, and there's like all of these now new master's degrees coming out in like consulting and agile thinking and design thinking and all of this new vocabulary is coming up. And experimental studio is a part of that conversation. And so on the one hand, so I took his class and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I feel like I've been looking for, but I didn't know that it existed. Like, I didn't know how to make what I do feel valid enough for people who aren't in this industry to accept it. And I feel like this work it's such a marriage. It's like, I'm angry that people who are trying to hire are always like, oh, I want someone who's creative. I want someone who's a self-starter, who's ambitious, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's an artist. Hire artists. Why aren't you hiring artists? You're hiring all these people and you want them to like fake talk about how creative they are. Like, hire an actual artist. And then other people, younger people might feel like, oh my God, I can be an artist and have a real job. You know, there's always this fear of like, oh, when you go to art school, you're never going to have a real job. No, you could have a real job. You could be a corporate artist. That could be a real thing. And it kind of started from that. It's just like, I feel like I have such amazing skills that businesses need, but they don't take me seriously because I introduce myself as an artist. And that's kind of where it started from. And I was like, how can I make this different? And so I just started, like trying to find words. And then this class happened and it really changed me and changed how I can view that. And so I've definitely kept in contact with Roger, and he's helped me a lot. And I've read a lot of really great books. And it's really just about researching and building your own philosophies and being able to just tell people about it.
Amazing. It's so, so, so exciting. I love it. Talk to me a little bit about what you were telling me about, creating space specifically for performers, and why the skills that performers embody are really valuable. And, you know, you were talking about how there isn't really that space for them. Like, for example, writers can very easily get corporate work, so can graphic designers. But performers are a group of people who often, you know, experience like the lowest income and, you know, the toughest, you know, the toughest job when it comes to finding opportunities. And yeah, what kind of doors you see opening for that kind of work, and specifically the skills and talents that performers have and why they are so valuable.
Yeah, so I think underlying again to this is the idea that actors specifically are really powerful and have and really need to take a ton of agency in their work. I think that we are still too much living in the world where an actor goes on auditions and they're the tool of the director, the tool of, and they're there to do the best they can to serve some kind of higher vision. Like, I kind of reject that base assumption. And I think that actors have an incredible amount of power, and the work that it takes not only to be a really good actor, but to actually be a successful actor in the industry, the skills, the talents, the sensibilities that you have to build in order to make that happen are the kind of soft skills that are unteachable, right? Like, you can hire someone and teach them how to use a software. You can hire them and teach them what to say on the phone, but it's really hard, and bosses and businesses don't want to take this responsibility to teach compassion or teach patience or teach active listening or it's energetic connection. And like, we spend hours and hours and so much money in acting classes, doing repetition exercises, doing mirroring exercises, watching people, and then bringing that into class and being characters that I can walk into a room and I can just stand in a corner and watch people. And from their body language, I can tell even if I couldn't hear them, I could probably tell who has the most status in the room. And that has nothing to do with their job title. It has something to do with how it's like we're animals, right? And I mean, I can just remember countless hours it being in like black rooms, wearing leotards, like moving like an animal, breathing like an animal. You know, it's all this stuff that people are like, this is crazy. This doesn't have anything to do with it. But it does. It really does. Like, really being in touch with nature and seasons and understanding that like winter depression is real, and how does that affect the workplace, and how are we not talking about that as leaders of teams? Like, it's your responsibility to make sure that your employees are taking enough vitamin D. Like, it starts with basic stuff like that. And I think performers, if they're willing to acknowledge that it's a marketplace, right? We have to understand that our capabilities are working in a marketplace. So right now, and maybe a couple of years ago, a lot of people were training as nurses because, we don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough nurses. Okay, fine. If you go to school, you become a nurse, you can make a lot of money because there's not enough nurses. It's the same thing with actors. The way that the world is, people are either intrigued or interested in spending tons of money on experiences in the theater, or they're not. But that doesn't have anything but you have to know what your value is, and you have to be able to bring it to the people that are going to respect your value. And so that doesn't always mean working in the theater and serving your director. It doesn't always mean being on set. It doesn't always mean that if you can't be on set or be in rehearsal that you don't have any value. And I think that my undergraduate program, the New School, is a really big believer in that, and that they've really trained us to be diverse humans and with diverse talents and being able to work in diverse settings. And that is how a diverse income and a diverse career is built. And I really appreciate that also, because I don't want to always be at the mercy of the market, right? Like, as an actor, I can only audition for what the theaters are doing. What if none of the theaters is doing a show that it has a writer that I really love? What if none of those stories are stories that I really want to tell? I'm not willing to work just so that I can say, I did this show, or I worked with this person. Like, I really want to be inspired when I'm working, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so when that's not happening, and I have the power to say, okay, I'm going to go do these other jobs that are still allowing me to flex those muscles, for me, it's like an athlete, when you're not playing, it doesn't mean that you're not valuable. No, you go to the gym, you go to practice. Like another way of going to the gym is like working in corporate offices. That's my vision.
Amazing. I think it's so important to be having this conversation about helping women, helping creative women to really choose to define and understand our value on like every level, and really also recognizing, and you're a perfect example of this, of a multi-passionate creative, recognizing that we're always going to have all of these influences, all of these passions, all of these outlets, all of these ideas and creativity, and there's always going to be a plethora of it. We're never, trying to fit into like being just one thing is just an idea that's never going to work for a lot of us.
Exactly.
So really like acknowledging that and owning it and understanding that it can work, and finding the way that it's going to work for you as an individual. And really, I think the value and everything that you were describing about performance is really helping people to get out of their heads and into their bodies, and to recognize that wisdom. Because, and this is something that as a mindset coach, I talk about all the time, that in our heads are filled with repetitive thoughts that come from other people, that come from the world around us. They come from our parents, our teachers, the freaking TV, like all of the ideas that other people have told us about who we are, all of these messages that we've internalized about ourselves that are not truthful to who we are. And the way that we get out of that and stop them from controlling our actions, the way that we think about ourselves and the value we give ourselves permission to create in the world, is to get into our bodies and to tap into that intuitive wisdom, and that the vision that comes from that animal intuition is in connection with the world around us. Because artists are visionaries. They're connected to the new direction and just one step at a time unfolding. Like maybe it doesn't make any sense, maybe it doesn't fit into the system, and that's exactly the conversation that's happening when we get out of our head and allow ourselves to follow that intuition, listen to our bodies, stop trying to force our bodies into the conversations that are happening in our head, which is where most people are communicating from.
I just remembered who said that quote. It's Gloria Steinem. I will post the about linking people together.
I love that.
Just had to note that real quick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's all put on some leotards and crawl around on the floor like animals.
Please.
Wouldn't it be more fun? People would probably be way more productive in the office, right?
They really would. And I really love when like real research or medicine supports the work that we're already doing. Like when now that everyone's like, the gut is your second brain, and your brain really doesn't know that much. It's just a mirror of all the stuff that you're seeing on a daily basis. And it really is just like predicting the future. It's not even, your reality isn't even actually anything. It's literally just a funhouse of future computer predictions. And your gut is the other half of your entire like feeling. When you don't feel well, when you like, and then connecting that to food and understanding that like medicine and food are the same. Food is medicine and energy medicine. And it's like, we don't need to be completely dependent on the pharmaceutical industries. Like we don't need to be completely dependent on the astronomical prices for produce in grocery stores. Like grow an avocado on your windowsill and make sure you drink tons of water. Like it could make a huge difference. And so when I walk into, workspaces or business spaces, or when I work with startups, and a lot of it's like people sitting in an office for hours and coding and working and like not taking that good care of themselves because they're so focused on making the money or whatever it is. I'm just like, your gut is going to be 50% of your success. 50% of your success. And so just working with that and like activating your midsection, and like hip circles are literally everything. Like do some hip circles. And it's like small things like that I bring in, and it kind of like, as you crack open your hips, you literally are also cracking open your imagination. And that's the door of manifesting the life, the products, the companies, the relationships that you create, that you desire.
Yeah. Hip circles are the answer to everything.
Thank you.
It's so simple. More hip circles, more lead the resistance with hip circles. I don't even really like the word resistance, but anyway, but okay, one thing I also really want to talk to you about is money, because yeah, it's really important. It's very disempowering when we don't have money and when we don't talk about money, and women the result of not talking about money, especially amongst women, is that we're not very good at it. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about your journey of, you said you kind of had that realization that you needed to have that solid understanding of the tools and the structures that were going to support you financially, and what that journey was like for you kind of stepping into that.
Yeah. It's so connected to ancestors for me, like it's really been challenging. My father is the oldest of 9 children, grew up in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, couldn't really finish college because he didn't have the money, joined the military because they were going to pay him money to finish. They were going to pay for him to finish college, and worked his way out of poverty, married a white woman, moved to Europe, and will never go back. Like, he'll never move back to New Orleans because he just doesn't want that. It feels like it would be going backwards to him. And he sends my grandma, he sends his mom and most of his brothers and sisters money every month. And he isn't necessarily even doing that well, but he has more than others. And there's this automatic kind of like, well, then I have to just like give it away. And then my other side of my family, my grandfather and his brother started a company way back when they were young, selling soap from door to door as German immigrants in the US. And they built it out to this huge pharmaceutical company. And that financial nest egg was then like given, like they started a little account for me when I was a baby. And I kind of like grew up with this like white grandfather who made financial resources available to me. And so like growing up with this, like on this one side that is now in comparison to my other side quite wealthy, and this other side who really is living under the poverty level, does not have a lot of resources. And my grandmother saying, my dad's mom saying things like, oh, I never worked. It was my job to raise children. But then my grandfather had 5 girls. He had 5 children and they're all women. So he had no choice but to inherit wealth to women. And so I feel just like wealth, like money is energy, wealth is an energetic thing. And when you're in touch with your energetic wealth, it will manifest in dollars. And that's the work. The work is to actually acknowledge how wealthy you are internally, that you have the capacity to love, that you have the capacity to forgive, that you have the capacity to be compassionate, that you have the capacity, like every time you give a hug, it's like if you could see every time you give a hug, like you're making money, then I feel like that could really change how we're thinking. Because if the strength that you have when you're giving someone a hug is the same strength that will make you money. It's the same thing. And so, yeah, I really feel like talking about it, being in touch with it as an extension of some kind of power that you have. And my mentor, Tanya Pinkins, she says, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm very wealthy. And she like always has enough space to live. She always has flowers around her. She always has friends that show up for her in her life when she feels weak or feels like she needs some support. It's like, okay, maybe she says she doesn't have a lot of money. I personally think it's just because she doesn't put a lot of focus on it, or maybe she doesn't put a lot of value onto it. She could easily have a lot of money if she wanted it, but she feels wealthy, and she says, I'm wealthy. And I think like being rich and being wealthy are different things. Like rich is the kind of like bad money that people are afraid of. It's like the evil people that are lying and manipulating, like that's rich. Rich doesn't really mean anything. That can go away in an instant. It can be stolen from you. It can go down the drain. But wealth is something that is inherent to you, that is inherent to everyone. That's what we're born with. And when we acknowledge it and we are grateful for it and we are proud of ourselves for that wealth, I think it shows up in dollars, either in someone gifting you, in someone creating an opportunity for you. And that's another thing, like money can come in so many different directions. It can be something like someone gives you something half off. someone gives you something for free. You go to the store and you want to buy a flower and they say, oh, just take it with you. That you just made money at that point, right? The fact that you didn't have to spend those $2 means now you're $2 richer. And I think of it really in little things like that. And I think that that is a reason why it also has allowed me to like build that further, and it kind of ripples through. And it's a part of the work that I do. It's easy. It's like not easy for me to ask for the money that I think I'm worth, but at least I don't shy away from it. I do the research. I figure out what's the competitive market value. And I walk into a room fully understanding that I have a solid number that is well thought out, that is comprised of what I need to live and what I think I'm worth and what I think you can pay. And then I'm willing to also be firm in those negotiations. And then, like you say, just be soft with yourself, be patient with yourself. Like it takes a lot of work to unlearn that and to like heal those ancestral lineages that often are blocking you from money.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, money is another system that has created a lot of resistance for a lot of people. And that just creates those layers of emotional resistance that, make it more challenging to take on the tools and like the structures that really support us to create wealth specifically in dollar amounts within that system. And, like you say, there's like the conversation around the association of people who are having money are the people who are either oppressing us or like making life difficult for us. And it's so important to start to flip the switch on that conversation and recognize, how women really are thriving and making money in their own ways, using their creativity and valuing themselves like more than has ever been possible. And, to really start to share those stories and to recognize that conversation around our self-worth and our value is the foundation that we can build wealth upon, because all the while that we're resisting ourselves, that we're rejecting, part of our story or the world around us, we're not really serving ourselves in allowing ourselves to, sit down and look at a spreadsheet and calculate our net worth and calculate how much we're spending, and really sit down and do that work and figure out how much do I want to be paid and can I be paid, and really deeply understanding the values that we're bringing to the table. And that is our work. That is our responsibility. And it's in doing that work that the wage gap will get closed, and we will create more happiness and fulfillment and monetary amounts in doing that work. And so I think it's just amazing what you're doing in bridging all of these worlds, like the business and the creative and the artist and the entrepreneurial. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, amazing. I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation. Yeah. And so for people to continue to follow you and to support you and to benefit from the work that you're doing, you have your two main projects, the Experimental Studio and the Mixed Space.
Yes.
So tell us, like, how can we continue to keep in touch with you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah. And also work with me. I love meeting new people. I love, like, I kind of grew up in an environment where I felt like when I was watching interviews with other people or I was meeting other people, that there was always this kind of like, they're far away. And I mean, not that I'm a big deal or anything, but like, no, it's like I want to work with people. Like, people are also wealth. Building your network is building your net worth. So let's all work together. Let's partner. But yeah, so the Mixed Space is the name of the Instagram, and you'll see the Mixed Space on my website, which is just my first name and my last name, lilysteifel.com. And there's like a bunch of info on the Mixed Space as it is growing into the world, and Experimental Studio, and there's emails and there's newsletters and there's Facebook groups, and it's everywhere. It's on Twitter. It's everywhere, and it's growing. And you're welcome. Please come connect with us.
Amazing. And we'll drop the links to all of those things in the comments
Perfect.
Below the videos. And if you have any, I'll also tag Lily. So if you have any questions, you know, feel free to leave them in the comments as well, for anyone who watches this replay. And yeah, I will look forward to continuing this conversation with you. I thank you so much for coming and showing up in the Big Creative Fun community. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have an amazing day, everyone.
You
Thank you for watching. Bye.
Bye.